Okay, guys, it's been a really long time, but welcome to the newest episode in Science Behind the Magic. If you're new here, I have a whole playlist of different videos I do explaining the science behind fantastical or sci-fi things because I have a scientific background and I love talking about science, and hopefully this sparks your curiosity and imagination and teaches you something cool. Today, our focus is memory. Because I noticed last year, and a lot of subscribers noticed, and Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads gave me this idea, that a lot of the books that I have read recently that have connected with me have to do with memory. This specifically came up with Incendiary, which has a magic system where people can pull memories from other individuals. But it also came up in Exhalation, where I had the story The Truth of Fact and the Truth of Feeling, which had that Black Mirror-esque device where you could perfectly recall a moment in your history. I also recently reviewed a memory called Empire, which also has to do with memory, both tangible and kind of societal. And even Each of Us a Desert had this idea of memory and stories and how they are held within us. So obviously, this is a topic that's very important to me. And as I mentioned in the memory called Empire review, I personally do find memory extremely important for myself. If someone were to ask me what defines who I am, sure, obviously there's a lot of variables. We have our genetic backgrounds, we have a lot of weird things, but for me, I think I am who I am right now today because of my past experiences, because of my memory, because I have adapted based off those past experiences. And if I don't have my memory, how do I become who I am right now? Which is why I always find amnesia plot arcs really interesting. I always like when we talk about that topic because then I can see different people's ideas about it and see how they stretch it. But for this video, I wanted to talk about what we do know about memory, how it's stored, how infallible it may or may not be, and make sure it's a good surface level discussion of the different theories that are out there. And I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff I learned, and hopefully you will enjoy it too. So what is memory? Well, at its core, it's your brain having all of these connections between neurons. All of these connections, because each neuron can have up to 10,000 connections in your brain, is how memories are stored. So what I wanted to talk about first, before getting into all of these theories, is just how that connectivity works. We all understand connection. We all have electricity running through our houses through wires. We understand that if we want to connect internet directly to our machine, we have to have an Ethernet cord. We have this idea of how things typically connect, but how does that work in our brain? And it's a little different. Yes, there are mechanical sites that connect to each other, but most of the time they connect through what's called a gap junction. So your synapse, which is what's called that area between neurons, is where you're going to have a lot of this connectivity happen. So what's going to happen is your neuron gets a signal. Imagine, your hand touches something hot, that burn, that pain, that's your body sending the signal up the line. And at the synapse, it needs to tell the next neuron, hey, we touched something hot. And it's going to release some particles across this gap junction. These particles specifically have a role to either activate or deactivate the next neuron, usually. Though it can be more complicated than that, but typically one neuron tells the next neuron, hey, wake up, or hey, go to sleep. That's normally how it works. It's like a computer, it's kind of binary. But the neuron will then go across the synaptic cleft, though it kind of diffuses. It's not very active or fast. It will be picked up by receptors on the next neuron, and then that neuron will go through its system and send the signal along. And these are the type of connections that just tell your brain how you're absorbing your reality, but also when you are going to recall a memory or when you're going to store a memory, these are the connections that are forming and being accessed. And it's all really cool, but also even as I'm, delving into the literature, it is very complicated and I think quite tricky to study because of how vast the system is. Like I said, we have thousands of neurons and each neuron has thousands upon thousands of connections, so it's very integrated. So now that we've done that detour, I just wanted to make sure you guys had like a loose biochemical understanding of what our neurons do in our brains. Let's talk about some of the theories behind what's happening. And this first one came to me because of Incendiary. So like I said, in this book, there's a magic system where someone can take the memories of another individual, and that individual no longer has their memories, and the person taking the memories now knows that moment perfectly. And I was curious about this because I don't know about you, but sometimes I can't remember what I had for breakfast 3 days ago. Or if you try to make me remember something from 8 years ago, that memory becomes a little bit fuzzier. So this magic system was implying that these memories are infallible, they are perfect screenshot capture of moments. And this does happen to be part of the theory of consolidation of memory, is for long-term memories, memories that you do have for a long period of time, it's like pen on paper. You write down the memory in your neurons, they're connected, and maybe right after the fact they could be smudged like ink on paper, but once it's set and it won't change. This is one of the theories, and I felt like this was the theory of memory that was being utilized in this magic system. But then that led me to something that I did learn about through a podcast, and something that's brought up in the Exhalation story, The Truth of Fact and the Truth of Feeling, is that there are these things called flashbulb memories. These are memories that aren't the same. You can look back and you were wrong. This happens a lot to people during traumatic events in history or in their own lives. Like in the United States, they've actually done studies that if you ask people where they were on September 11th, they will tell you up and down, they swear they had this for breakfast, they talked to that person, they did X, Y, and Z, and it's wrong. People misremember those moments. Now, part of the theory that one scientist has is the more you recall a memory, the more it has the chance to change. That recalling the memory and then storing it again can allow for a change to occur. And he's done some studies with mice that kind of sort of support the theory, but like I said, still a theory. But for sure, I think we can all relate to the idea that we don't have perfect recall. We don't have perfect memories. Our memories are not and should not be considered infallible. So having those two stories read in my mind within a couple months of each other really triggered that brain pattern for me. But also, a lot more interesting things happen with Incendiary, because our main character, who can do the memory pull, actually doesn't remember a lot of her own memories because of post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's this theory of state-dependent learning, that when you are in a certain state, certain emotional state, certain stress state, your storage of memory is done differently than when you're in, we'll call it a normal, calm state. Not even calm, just like your average state of being. And that you are more able to access those memories when you are put back into the state at which you first remembered it. And this is something a lot of therapists have been using lately, and it's kind of been proven in other mice studies and things like that, but this is something that does happen to our character in Incendiary, that when she is put in an environment and in a similar stress situation, she has easier access to these repressed memories. But this also leads us to this idea of like, well, how are memories stored? And it seems like they are stored differently based off emotional state, based off if it's short or long term. And there's a lot of cool information on short and long-term memory. Apparently auditory is really like rough on short term, which makes sense, because have you ever heard someone's name and instantly forgot it? Because that's me at every conference I ever go to. But it's just, I find all of this really fascinating, like how our minds work, how much we can trust our minds. It's just so interesting to me. And kind of on the sadder sides of things, so I'm going to put a content warning here for Alzheimer's and dementia, although I'm not going to be going into it in depth, but I know this is a thing that affects a lot of families. It has affected my own. And so why does memory fail? What is happening? So we go back to this connectivity of neurons. We have these neurons that have to talk to each other, and you can see there's this gap. They have to move things across the gap. One of the ways this fails is obstructions get in the way. There are physical things that block the connectivity. There are other things that cause some neurons to die, so suddenly you have a break in the chain. Things cannot connect as well. This can also happen in MS, where you have usually along an axon that allows for the electrical power to be put through, because all of this is done through electrical currents in your brain. If you have this myelin gone away because of MS, then it's not able to conduct as well. So that also affects the conductivity and the connectivity. So basically, it's this failure in connection and this what's called atrophy. And you probably have heard of atrophy when it comes to muscle, but it's very similar when it comes to neurons as well. It doesn't have to just be muscle cells. So that is how memory fails, is when we lose that connectivity. And honestly, the science behind that is still trying to figure it out, because I think we see the symptoms. We can look at the brain and we can see the obstructions. We can see the changes in phenotype. but we don't know what's causing it, and we don't know how to stop it very effectively. I'll have in the description below reference links to the things I've talked about, and they're all very accessible articles about the flashbulb effect, state-dependent learning, Alzheimer's. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me and I'll try and find the answer if I don't know it already. And if you have other ideas for future Science Behind the Magics, feel free to list those in the description as well. I'm always looking for ideas. Like I said, this one came to me from Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads. So yeah, and with that, if you want to leave a brain emoji in the description below, I think that exists. If not, I'm sorry. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.